Hello again, it's Kylie of Kylie in Kentucky, and welcome to the second installment in my watercolor lettering basics series here on my blog and YouTube channel. Last week we talked about watercolors. This week we're talking about brushes, paper, and the other things you need to move forward with your lettering. Let's go ahead and start looking at brushes. I have a couple different kinds here. Actually, just two different types when you break it down that I've used in my lettering, and I think these are the most standard kinds of brushes that other people use for lettering with watercolors. First, I'll apply just a drop of the Dr. P.H. Martin's Radiant Watercolor that I discussed and showed in last week's watercolor video. So definitely take a look at that video if you're curious about where to pick up these watercolors and what they're like. I'm just going to be using the first set of brushes, which are water brushes, and swatching with this beautiful paint. So there are a lot of different water brushes out there. This one's total crap. I got it at Hobby Lobby. I've had other people vouch that that one is not good. So I'm going to point you in the direction of the Pentel Aquash watercolor brushes, which are what I'm holding right now. They come in a pack of 3 different sizes, very affordable, and you unscrew the top section and you put water into the bottom section, and that's actually kind of replacing the little cup or glass of water that you would normally need when you're doing watercolors. So once the base is full of water, it actually comes out through the tip of the brush and causes the brush to be damp, and then you can squeeze the base and water will come out and will activate your watercolor. So these brushes are really great if you're traveling or just practicing like on the couch and you don't want to have to worry about a cup of water like I do, because I'm lazy and I love comfort. So I'm just swatching with an upstroke, a downstroke, and like a curvy little line so that you can see the mechanics of this pen. This also can serve as an excellent brush warm-up, which we'll discuss in the next video next Monday. But for now, we're just kind of looking at the different types of brushes, sizes, so that you can see what you think will work best for you. And I'm going to go on and swatch with the other 2 sizes in the Aquash brush pens. Next up are these round brushes that are specifically made for lettering. These are Folk Art brand. I picked them up at Walmart, came in a pack of 4, very affordable. I think they were less than $5. So I'd highly encourage you to pick these up for an actual brush. So really the only thing you need to look for in a brush when you're lettering is that you do need what is called a round brush, and it will say that on the brush or on the package. So that's the buzzword that you need to look out for, and these brushes are round brushes. Once again, they come in different sizes, and I love the thickness of this huge brush. I think it looks so good. The downstrokes are incredibly smooth and thick, and the watercolor just works super well with these brushes. So I'm going to go ahead and swatch all the remaining 3 sizes in these Folk Art watercolor lettering brushes. Next up is a different brand in a round brush. This one was just slightly more expensive, and I believe I got this one at Hobby Lobby, and as you can see, it is well loved by me. I have used it to death, but I think it's actually on its way out, so don't trust the swatch that I'm giving you because I have used it. And I'm also showing you the teeny tiny little Winsor & Newton brush that came in the travel watercolor set that I showed in last week's watercolor demonstration. So you can just see the difference in the brushes. There isn't a huge difference, which is why I didn't really spend too much time showing you many different kinds of brushes. When you're experimenting, I highly recommend making a note, swatching everything, and then making a little note about which brushes or which swatches, so that in the end you can know kind of which one you like best. You can make your decision after everything has dried. And this is something I do all the time for colors, for brushes, and for papers actually, which is what we're going to talk about next. Now let's start talking about paper. So I'm going to show you a mixed media pad first and then a watercolor paper. These are the two papers that I see used most with watercolor and that I have also experimented with. So mixed media paper is just a little bit thinner and a little smoother than watercolor paper because it's meant for more than just one type of medium. So you could use it with different types of paints, but it's really not meant to hold a lot of liquid. So when you're using watercolors, you don't want your watercolor to be too liquidous if you're using it with mixed media paper. So you might not be able to tell it exactly right here, but the water is not really grabbing onto the paper, and I grabbed a piece of cardstock here to compare because cardstock is really smooth and thinner, so the paper, when you apply the watercolor paint, it just doesn't have much to grab onto and it wants to move around and not really settle in the right spot, and you can't have as much control, and also the paper will start to buckle and warp a little bit once liquid is applied. It won't do that as much with the mixed media paper, but watercolor paper is really the way to go. Watercolor paper is really thick, it's textured, it's meant to have liquid applied to it so that the water actually has something to grab onto. And when I'm swatching these colors, the paint stays exactly where I put it. So it's not trying to move around and puddle up or pool. The paper isn't going to get warped because it's actually meant to hold a lot of water. So you can be really experimental with how much water you're using, and you can do crazy fun things, and you can layer watercolors on top of one another, and the paper can handle it because that's what it's made for. So when you're buying paper, I highly suggest getting anything that is actually watercolor specific. I stepped away for just a minute so that this could dry, and you could see how it dries on the watercolor paper. It pretty much looks exactly the same as how we applied it. It changes just a little bit, that's the nature of watercolor, but for the most part it's the same. This is the cardstock, and you can see it looks like freckled and not very good, and the pigment is rubbing off on my finger, so that's no good at all. And then lastly, the mixed media paper, a little bit warped, but once again, it's got a pretty cool watercolor texture. So I say mixed media paper is probably the second best option for papers. And lastly, you'll need to have a cup of clean water, a paper towel to blot your brush and to wipe color off of your brush, and whatever palette you'd like to use. I've got a ceramic dish, a plastic palette, and just like a 99-cent palette from Walmart. And that completes the materials section of this 5-part series. So last week we talked about watercolors, this week we discussed the other materials, and next week we're getting into the lettering in part 3 on how to use a brush and then also creating a basic alphabet. So definitely subscribe if you haven't yet. I can't wait to see you next week. And don't forget to check out the blog post linked in the description box that accompanies this video, and will give you even more details, provide links to where you can pick these brushes up, and to give you some more helpful advice on watercolor lettering.